Welcome everyone to our Resource YYC Lunch and Learn today. Today we have some great guest speakers, Erican and Brock from the Superheroes Academy. So I will pass it over to you in a second, but just so you're aware, Resource YYC is a co-working community for professionals. We have dedicated desks and private office spaces, as well as virtual office options. So if you're ever in need, come check us out. All right, over to you guys.
Great, thanks, Rosemary. So welcome everyone. Really excited to be here again, and thanks Resource YYC for having us. Always enjoy sharing with this crowd. So you've got a product vision, now what? And so we're going to explore this topic together. It's going to be a hands-on workshop where we're going to work through what do you do as a product owner, as an entrepreneur, when you've got a product idea, you've got a vision. What do you do from there? How do you get that built? And so we're going to be looking at that today. Some of the things that we're going to be covering in particular, we're going to be talking through the problem when you end up with a vision and what to do from there. We're going to introduce you to a tool called user story mapping that will be instrumental in helping you move from your product vision into a workable product backlog with your teams. And then we're going to solidify the learnings from today through a debrief and a discussion that we'll be having together.
Great. And before we go too far, just a quick introduction. Person who's just speaking is Brock Argue, and I'm Erican Kadir. We're going to be your speakers for today. We are certified team coaches and enterprise coaches through the Scrum Alliance. And we consider ourselves agile coaches, organization and relationship systems coaches, and vertical development coaches. Our company is Superheroes Academy. We're based out of Calgary, as you can see in my virtual background. We're available to both individuals and organizations who are looking for change and want some support with that. So let's get started. So as Brock mentioned, let's say you are a product owner, maybe you're a team, and you've got a vision for a product well in hand. Well, what do you do with it? How do you go about translating that vision into the collection of user stories that you're going to need to populate your backlog so that your team can start sprinting? How do you go about understanding and integrating all of the different viewpoints that you might have from different stakeholders, customer groups, technical subject matter experts, without having to stall your progress by kicking off these lengthy discovery and design phases and potentially being locked in meetings for weeks or even months before you're able to get started building that first story? How can we feed our development teams requirements so that they can use to deliver value immediately on the first sprint without a whole bunch of spikes and architecture stories and these types of things? Well, if that sounds sort of like a familiar challenge, what we find is that all too often new product initiatives can start really slowly, as a whole bunch of these things that I just mentioned need to sort of come together before we can really start incrementing to deliver value. And so that's where user story mapping really shines. It's sort of a hack for that quick start situation because it's a technique that you can go from vision to your initial backlog in just a single afternoon, all the while building a shared understanding with your development team, your stakeholders, your clients, and so forth. And so, as Brock mentioned, we're going to take a workshop approach to this particular session. And so you all are going to learn user story mapping by actually doing it.
Okay. And so we're going to use Mural for this. And so there's a link on the screen. I'll just share it in the Zoom chat there as well. And please join us on the Mural board there. And then first thing we'll do is get you introduced to our friend, George. And Eric, do you want to share the Mural as we talk through this as well?
Sure.
The first part? Okay. And so you should be able to join Mural as a guest or visitor, whatever it is. You shouldn't have to log in with an account or anything. And we'll just give a minute for everyone to join us there. Okay, so it looks like we've got a few people in. Is anyone not in Mural with us yet? Okay. All right, so the first thing we need to do is introduce you to our friend George. And so let's take a look at George, and you'll see him at the top there as we zoom in. Eric, are you able to zoom in a bit more for us? There we go. And so what we have here is just a persona that helps describe George, who we're going to be working with today. And so George, he's a software developer. He's about 35 years old. He is not a morning person. And so you see that down in the bottom left there, the demographics and whatnot. He has a wife, 2 kids, and a dog. And George enjoys working out and reading in the morning. So he likes to take his time and do those things. He does love this thing called Miracle Mornings, which he rarely gets the opportunity to do just because of the time that everything has to happen. And him and his wife take turns getting the kids ready for school. And so it's his week to get the kids ready. George also has some needs and pain points. And so he has a need to be viewed as a hard worker. But he also has a pain point where he has trouble making it to work on time. And so he makes up for that by staying late to show that he's a good worker. And so that's a bit about our friend George, just a quick persona that we've put together for us to help understand who we're working with today.
Okay, and so we're going to add a little bit of context to what we're going to be doing with George as well. So George is the persona that represents the segment of customers that we are going to be going after with the particular product that we're building. And so Brock and I are going to be the product owners of this product, and we have a vision for that product, which is we need to get our persona, George, ready for work. Okay. But we don't have a backlog, and we don't have a strategy, and we don't have a roadmap. And so you all are going to help us with that. And so the first step is keeping in mind your understanding of the persona that we just put forward. Coming down to the user tasks section of the mural here, we want you to create as many stickies as you can possibly think of for all of the different tasks that George might do when he's getting ready in the morning. Now, if you're new to Mural, you can click and drag to move it around so to get yourself down to the user tasks. And then in order to create a sticky, all you do is double click, a sticky will pop up and you can type something in it. And then as long as down at the bottom here in the navigation settings, as long as you have the appropriate mode set, whether it's mouse mode or trackpad mode, you'll be able to either use your mouse wheel to zoom in and out, or you'll be able to use 2 fingers on your trackpad to zoom in. Okay, and so just go ahead, as many tasks as you could possibly think of that George might do when he's getting ready in the morning. And we're looking for quantity over quality here. And so just to give you some early feedback, brush teeth is a perfect example of the type of thing we're looking for. Check email is another good one. So let's keep those going.
All right, looks like it's going pretty well here. We'll give you probably another 30 seconds or so just to get in any of those tasks, anything you could think of that George needs to do to get ready for work in the morning. Okay, so we'll call that good enough for now. And if other things come to mind, feel free to add them as we go through the activity. And you've kind of already started, doing this, but what we'd like you to do next, thanks, Erkan, is to arrange the sticky notes in a cohesive timeline from left to right in terms of what George needs to do first versus what he needs to do last, which would go on the right. And we're making one timeline for George. So not one timeline for maybe what you do in the morning, but this is George would have one timeline across the whole board. And just like the picture you can see right now on the screen, anything that's a duplicate or a variation of the same task, you can stack vertically. And then everything that are different tasks, you would put sequentially in order from left to right. So we'll give you a couple minutes to do that.
Feel free to talk and collaborate. You might have some questions for each other as part of this. And that's all part of it.
Somebody's got get kids ready for school, and I have a bunch of those that would probably kind of go with them.
Check email, a trick one. That's what they say everybody does before they even get out of bed.
Probably going to show up multiple times in the list if it's realistic, right?
I'm sure some of these vary by person, but I think the timeline looks pretty good.
Timeline is looking great. Is there anything on the left-hand side that looks like it might be combined into categories? Great. So this is looking excellent. By the way, as we continue to progress through the activity, you'll invariably have new ideas and things that come to you for tasks. Feel free to add them as we go along, and feel free to rearrange things as well as you think of different stuff. But let's go ahead and move to the next activity here, or the next section. So what we're going to do next is we're going to ask you to think through a central question of what activities is George completing by engaging in the tasks that you have on the screen. And so for each vertical column, we're going to have you enter a green card and just give that column a name. And good practice here when you're coming up with a name is to see if you can name it such that it's a verb, okay? And so just as an example, actually, I guess I'll just say a couple things. So, get ready could be an example of the name of a column. And you could argue that those two words together are a verb. And then the way we change the color is you just come to this little tab that I've got on the screen here, and you can change it to light green. Okay, there we go. Good verb, rise up. For the third column, you have the word "and" in your user activity there. And anytime we see the word "and" in a goal that we have, I would suggest that there might actually be two goals here. So potentially there's two columns. Maybe there's just one that's named something different. We'll leave that to you all to decide.
Okay, so that is looking really great. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go one level up from the green cards. I'm going to ask you to use purple cards. And what we're going to be doing is just thinking through what is George trying to accomplish by completing these green cards, which are the activities, okay? And so these are kind of his overall goals that he's trying to accomplish. So you see an example here where you might have, a purple card for every column, or you might have a purple card and the next set of columns, to the right until there's another purple card would all be kind of grouped under that one. And so I'll leave it to you to decide if things need to be grouped under one purple card or multiple or what, but really looking for what are the things that George is trying to accomplish by engaging in those green cards, in those activities. And so feel free to add those to the board now.
Substance. Really good example of a reason why George might choose to engage in these activities in the first place. And that's really what we want to get to, is that why these purple cards. So really good example there. Hey, this is starting to look really good. This is starting to shape up. And so what we're going to do next is we've got a scenario that we want you to think through here. And we're just going to go ahead, place that on the left. So is an emergency. Unfortunately, this particular morning, George's alarm didn't sound. And he just woke up and there is an emergency at work. George's boss has called him screaming. The site is down and he needs to be at work literally in 10 minutes. Okay. And he does not live that close either. So he's got to book it. So what I'd like you to do is, given that scenario, I'd like you to do some prioritization. And everything that you would still do in that scenario, go ahead and leave it above the black horizontal line that we just drew. And everything that we might choose to defer, just go ahead and pull it down. And then as you do that, do your best to keep them in the same vertical columns that you have them. No, not the coffee. Oh, it's gonna be a long day. You all would make great product owners, by the way, being able to make these tough decisions. Hey, that's starting to look pretty solid. So we'll ask you a similar question. So this time, there isn't as big of an emergency as before. And the alarm did go off. However, partway through the morning routine, you get that same call from the boss. So George's boss obviously does. It's a pattern of calling him in the morning when he gets anxious about things. And so he would like George to get in right away. So he was able to do a couple more things, but maybe not absolutely everything.
Okay, so this is looking fantastic, and I'm making up that you all have done this before, but who's used a tool like this in the past? Okay, a couple of people. Oh, great, yeah, for sure. Great, so great job on this. So what we have here, what you've created together, is a user story map, and the user story map is a useful tool from going from that product vision to a workable product backlog. And so you'll see that as we kind of work through this activity where we started with a product vision, a product goal of getting George ready for work in the morning, and have now been able to kind of think through, what are all the things that need to be done for him to get ready? What things should we do first before others? What things can wait until later? All of those types of things. And so this is a great tool, if you're a product owner trying to come up with a product backlog, or work with your team to come up with, what are all the things that need to be built for the product or feature that you have. And it really just helps to kind of break things down into, from that big idea into a workable product backlog. And so, a few things that we'll mention about this, just to solidify some learning here before we get into our general discussion, is what you've created. So we have all these yellow cards, which are all the tasks. And so when you're thinking of your product backlog, those will probably end up being your user stories that you have in your product backlog. And then you also have, the green cards, which represent the activities, and the purple cards, which represent the goals that the user will be taking into account of the things that they want to do. It's called a user story map because it tells a story about your user. And so in this case, we have one user, we have George, and this tells the story of how he's, in this case, getting ready for work. But as you look at the story map, you're actually able to read it left to right and really understand the story of what's happening for George, right? And so you might look at this and say, you might read the cards and say, well, George is going to get ready for work. So I'm looking at the first green card, the second green card there. He's going to get ready by changing his clothes or brushing his teeth and asking his wife to get the kids ready. And then he's going to prepare breakfast, and then he's going to eat breakfast. And the way you kind of read through it is as you go horizontally, you say, and then between the different cards. And as you go vertically, you would say and or. And it, really helps to read as a story. And this is something that can be useful, just to help your team and your stakeholders understand what is going on for the various users of your product and how they might be interacting with it. One of the other things that can be useful, so in our example, we had one persona. You may choose to have multiple personas represented on your story map, and you can also then, you could color code, say those yellow stickies based on persona. So just by looking at the story map, you can see by color sections which personas you're working with and where they maybe interact and end up, using the same parts of the system, those types of things.
A couple other thoughts on the user story map that you created is we call user story maps multi-dimensional backlogs for multi-dimensional problems. And what we mean by that is you can actually use what you just created as your product backlog that your team works right off of. And the way you do that is you'll notice on the left here, these three vertical slices, or horizontal slices that you created can be thought of as releases. So the first slice would be like your MVP or your first iteration, where you're doing this really thin vertical walking skeleton of your product with only the most important features. And then the next release adds the next level of most important features and so on and so forth. And so what your team would do is in their sprint planning meeting or whatever, they would simply look at this first row here, and then they would pull yellow cards onto their sprint backlog from left to right based on how many they can get done. And hopefully they've got a small release slice here that can be delivered within a sprint or two. So that the team can run quickly to their customers. The other thing you can do is if you don't want to use this as a multi-dimensional backlog, you want to transpose it into Jira or something like that in a single ordered list. You can convert these yellow cards into user stories by simply using the user story format and saying, as George, that's your persona, I want to change clothes, that's my yellow card, so that, and then you might say, I can get ready, or so that I can kickstart the day. And you can go ahead and create user stories that are then ordered in that way. The other thing I just want to point out about these particular user stories that you all created these are really darn good user stories. And what I mean by darn good is they're all written in the perspective of your user. It's very clear why you're doing it and what value you're creating. What you didn't do is you didn't create a whole bunch of technical tasks or technical user stories that talk about your output and not your outcomes. So nobody created a story that said, hey, let's design the architecture of this alarm clock. And so from our perspective as Agile coaches, y'all did an amazing job with respect to customer centricity and creating really effective user stories. And what we want to suggest is one of the reasons why you're able to do that is we started building this particular user story from the bottom up, right? So we talked about what is it that we're trying to accomplish for the user, and then we went to the top. Oftentimes, when we see this particular technique being used in industry, it goes the opposite direction where we go from top down. So we'll start with our vision, then we'll break that down into a couple major goals, then we'll break that down into a couple features. And by the time you get to the bottom, those yellow tasks, they don't actually have anything that resemble the user in them. Now they're things like, let's do some research, let's design this thing, let's architect that thing, let's build some technical stuff. And so George tends to get lost in the equation when we move from top down in our experience. So you all did a great job, and I think that was one of the reasons why. You know, and then lastly is that sort of the way that you built this is something that aligns with the new way of work. So oftentimes backlogs are created by product owners or maybe just a couple people in isolation. But the whole point of this activity is that you bring all of the people who care about this product and who might have information about it together into one room, and they can collaborate and they can create a shared understanding. And hey, you know, even though you all created the tasks and you did some initial prioritization, as your product owners, Brock and I would still reserve the right to say, well, you know what, to maintain our vision, we're going to go ahead and move this one up, and we're going to move this one down. We're going to thank you for your feedback, and we're going to, you know, make the final decision what the product backlog is going to look like. So you can sort of have your cake and eat it too when it comes to listening to your customers, but then ultimately driving towards your vision. So we would like to know about what your experience was like in this activity as we went through it. What was it like for you?
You're on here. Yeah, this is a great tool. Actually, I haven't seen it used before, but good collaboration quickly. I've seen this done with Post-it notes, but it can take a lot longer. So I'll definitely keep this tool in my toolbox.
I was impressed by how fast it emerged, the backlog, and how fast it converged into something that made sense as a whole. And then there were additional tasks even showing up to complete basically the panorama of George's needs. Yeah, I mean, I also have some kind of questions where I wonder whether that will work in my environment. Yeah, because having a product goal definitely is a nice thing, but often there's also things like we need to get this and that metric up by X%. So how could I kind of merge these things?
That's a great question, Joe. One of the ways that, you know, you say about how to merge these techniques, one of the ways that I would do that based on what you're saying is, so you do have a product goal overall, like you're building the product for some reason, and maybe you've mapped out, you know, some of the things that you need to build. So where in these cases where we have what I'm going to call the horizontal release slices, you know, George's alarm doesn't sound, or he's partway through, or everything goes as planned. You might have a release slice there with some things in it. And what you can also add on the left side there is the focus of that release and how you're going to measure the success of that release. And by release, what I just mean is, you know, it's a time box within which you're building things, right?
Yeah.
Because these days you can deploy, you know, all the time to production environments. So that's not really what I'm talking about. But so you might say, you know, I got this product goal. Here's a bunch of things we're doing. The focus is on, you know, reducing this metric. Our target is to reduce it by this much. And then that's going to be the focus of what you're doing as you're building those things. And as a product owner, you'll be aligning the things that you're working on in that release slice such that, you know, they contribute to bringing that down. And so you can definitely do that to have focus and measures of success and things on the left side there for each of the slices.
Thank
you. Yeah, that was a great question.
You mentioned something about moving this from here into like a project software or something. What was that software that you guys use?
You know, I had mentioned the name Jira, just because it's very common. But there's lots of different tools. That the actual tool doesn't matter as much. But what is really common is that organizations are going to expect their product teams to visualize, I guess, their requirements in a single ordered list. And yeah, like you would just do that literally by tilting your head to the left. And so, you can take those items in the order that they appear from left to right per vertical column, and then just horizontal column, and then just put them in a list. Or you can just use the story map as is. Both more effective ways.
Okay. There's it's more like a Kanban, like a card style. I just wondering what's Jira? How do you spell it?
Jira, and it's just a really popular tool that teams use to manage their agile requirements.
Okay.
And so it's got a backlog that you can use to manage requirements, and then it'll have a whole bunch of facilities for teams to choose which items they're going to work on per sprint of things if they're happen to be working in a Scrum setup.
Nice.
One of the things that I'm curious about, so I know there's a couple of people at the start that said, yeah, I've used a tool like this before, the user story map. I'm curious, when you've used it in the past, what was your experience like with that? What did you find helpful? What did you find challenging with it? What were your thoughts there?
I'd mention I like more literal sticky boards on whiteboards, right? And sometimes just the physical effort of getting people up and engaged to get this started right away, right? Because I think, I don't know, maybe more it's the digital side of it there, but getting people engaged is a lot more physical effort, and you're putting yourself out there when you write on a sticky and put it up there, where this seems to be more interactive from my perspective, and it goes really quick using this type of process, right?
Great, yeah, thanks, Ron.
Yeah. And our experience has probably even been the opposite in a little ways. There's usually a little bit more energy, a little easier to get people into this when we're actually using stickies on the wall.
Yeah.
If we can ever replace the digital tool with just being together in person and a pack of stickies, there's nothing we would replace with that.
I think it's
first choice.
It's definitely, you get probably more discussion around these in person, right? Which probably makes it longer because you actually talk through a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah, although you don't want this to be too long.
Yeah.
So literally, an afternoon is what I would time box an activity like this to. This isn't going to be the project plan that we stick to as we build the entire product, right? By the time we get to that third slice even, we might be done, or we might have learned something that caused us to pivot. I mean, hopefully we did, that caused us to pivot maybe in a completely different direction. And so we do this as a quick and dirty way of generating shared understanding, but also just to get started quickly, right? So our development team, they're going to work on changing clothes and brushing teeth tomorrow. So we solved that challenge. And now we might even go out back to the market and do some more in-depth discovery work of things that are going to change what we have. That's fine too. So yeah, I'd say something to watch for is if this process is taking multi-day.
Yeah, I have a product owner who's done that with the team, and they arrived with the user goals and half of the activities kind of mapped out, and it turned out to be a map from front end to back end. So I will definitely try to lobby for a bottom-up approach next time, which is having a general goal in mind, and then just iterate and experiment with that, and hopefully having something emerge like this where it's really more user focused.
Yeah, Yeah, thanks for that, Joe. That's been kind of our experience as well. Is top down is very popular and it works, but there are challenges like that you run into where you end up with components or front end, back end, or things like that um, don't well describe the user's journey in your product, and doesn't kind of maintain that focus around the user. So that can be helpful to do it bottom up. Yeah. One of the experiences that I've had with this, Erkan's been saying a couple times, like, oh yeah, just take an afternoon, you do it in a few hours. And so, the previous client I've actually worked, they had a new product that they're rolling out. And what we ended up doing is we pulled together the team that was going to be working on it, product owner, of course, stakeholders in the organization, customers outside of the organization, users, and had them all in, this was back in person, so had them all in a boardroom all together, and did a story mapping exercise like this. And the format that we took is we started with product owner sharing the vision, so that product goal. Then we created personas together, and that was super useful because we had the users there, and so they could actually tell us like, yes, that's accurate, or no, it's not. And then we put those personas up, and then we use those to help guide creation of the story map. And some of the things that we noticed, so I mean, that shared understanding Erkan's mentioned, definitely came across, which was super useful. Just connecting the team to the users and clients was also very useful, just to get that empathy for them and how they use the product and the challenges that they're solving by using the product. And then one of the other things that happened, which was a bonus, which is why I would always recommend doing this with clients and users, is we broke out those release slices together, right? And there's no timeline on them yet, or we haven't committed to anything. But together we decided on, for the most part, what's going to be in, what order we're going to do things. And so later on, when a client said, hey, when is such and such going to be delivered? We were able to point back to the story map and say, well, you remember we did that mapping session together and we said these were more important, and then we do these next. And so that's when we're going to do it. And it was those conversations were a lot easier because it was more like, oh yeah, right, I was there, I did have input, okay, great. And so that's just another benefit that I've seen to doing this, and involving not a ton of people, but just a slightly larger group than the team to get the additional perspective from your users and clients.
I have to run now. This is a great session. Thanks, guys, for doing this.
Thanks, Sean.
Hey.
So there's a few resources that we have here as well that you could maybe take a look at if you're interested in going deeper. Jeff Patton is the guy who came up with this technique, and so he's got a book called User Story Mapping. There's also the second link there is a quick reference guide. That's just like a 2-page PDF that you can download that'll show you basically what we've walked through so far today. And so that might be a good starting point. His book is also excellent as well. The third one there is impact mapping. That's another way to do the same kind of thing. So it's just a different type of technique. So you may find that more useful for you than this one. So that's just another thing that you can check out. And then additionally, feel free to reach out to us if you're looking for any support on things like user story mapping, or you want to go deeper in product ownership or Scrum mastering or coaching. We do offer online programs. We have an advanced certified product owner program that might be of interest to you as well. So feel free to look us up and check us out. And with that, really just appreciate, the invite to have us here again. So thank you, Rosemary and team. Trust this has been useful for all of you, and look forward to the next time that we get to share.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brock and Erkan. That was a really good presentation, and very interactive, as you said it would be. And I hope everyone got some steps. And yeah, we did get into the Post-its pretty quick. So I think that was definitely a bonus. And everyone got to try out whiteboard. All right, well, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay,
Thanks, everyone.
bye.